The first Modern Pro Tour in 4 years has just concluded. Lord of the Rings has just taken over the Magic the Gathering scene, and Post Malone has officially bought the most expensive card in Magic history. That's not a Black Lotus. It feels like Magic is healing, and it's up to new and greater bounds. But I'm here to talk about, with the upcoming ban and restricted announcement, how Modern can heal further and how it can change with the times. I want to talk about my predictions to what I think will be banned or unbanned in the Modern format. And I want to take that in two different lenses. First, taking it from the lens of the Modern Pro Tour that just happened, then taking it from the Modern format and Modern Horizons in general as a set and how it's affected it, and a bonus section at the end that you might not be ready for. So join me on this ride. I'm going to try and speed through some of this stuff. They can be a relatively long video, but I have a lot of things to cover. Let's get right into it with Lord of the Rings. Shout out to Jake Beardsley for winning Pro Tour Lord of the Rings Modern with Rakdos Evoke. And one of the key, or I should say Rakdos Scam, one of the key interactions with this deck is the Grief reanimation combo. So you play down Grief, it comes down as a 3/2, you Thoughtseize your opponent, but as it goes to die, you then cast Feign Death to bring it back, then Thoughtseizing your opponent again. I'm going to talk about this interaction later on in the Modern Horizon section. I want to save this to Lord of the Rings specific cards, but this scam, this is the scam part of the deck. You can also do this with Fury. So you kind of cheat out these big creatures. You have all these like effects that you do. And so I think noting this is important, but let's talk about something like Orcish Bowmasters. I don't think, first and foremost, I don't think this card is going to get banned. I think this card is actually really good for the Modern format. That might be a hot take, but I don't think giving people the ability to draw cards at will for free is actually good for this format. I think having something like Orcish Bowmasters to kind of hold that back is really important. And Orcish Bowmasters actually stop something like Ragavan, which is also in the deck. Ragavan, I don't think will get banned either. I think we're past that point. It's a really powerful creature. It forces you to have removal early or it will run away with the game. So Orcish Bowmasters stop that. We already have cards like Solitude and Fury that stop that as well. So I think Bowmasters ultimately will have the ability to change the Modern format and really stymie some interactions that might develop with future cards or current cards that exist. So just creating two bodies, deleting something or just doing some damage to your opponent, and just preventing draws from a card that we're going to talk about in a second is really important. I think this card is safe as a ban. The next card I want to talk about is from Christian Calcano's second place list from that Pro Tour. If you look at the bottom left, one of the key cards that this deck is shaving Karn Liberated for is the One Ring. Now this card is a multifaceted discussion. It's a 4-mana legendary artifact, colorless, so it's accessible to all decks out there. When it enters the battlefield and you cast it, so you can't like reanimate it or blink it, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything. So you fog your opponent out, their combat damage does nothing. You can then draw up to 3 cards. Many of you are already aware of this interaction. You cast it, you tap it, and then on your untap, you let the burden trigger go, and then you tap it again to then draw 2 cards. You've effectively fogged your opponent, you've time walked, and you've drawn 3 cards. It's a pretty good deal for 4 mana. And it's one of those weird legendaries that's really good in multiple copies, because you then want to then just chain One Rings. You want to draw into other One Rings, cast it again for the protection, and just continue drawing so that there's not too many counters on it. And you're able to get rid of the kind of the life loss aspect of it and just keep drawing cards. It's really strange that way. It's a really good card in multiples, unlike many other legendaries in the Modern format. Now, I don't think this card is going under anyone's radar, I should say. As you see from the Goldfish metagame here, one of the most commonly played cards in the Modern format as the 5th most played card, one of the most commonly played spells outside of creatures. It is the 4th most played spell in the Modern format, and even in the Pro Tour, as we see from Saffron Olive, at least 41.8% of decks are playing the One Ring. Bowmasters is right under that, is just under 39%. And so it's all over the Modern metagame. Every deck that can play it is trying it. Heck, even as a mill player, the mill decks are playing it as well. It's really important to acknowledge that. I think this card in general is a contender to get banned, but I don't think it will, which might upset some people. I think it very well should be. I think it can be, but I don't think it will ultimately because of the bad PR for it. It is one of the face cards, the marquee cards of the Lord of the Rings set that just released June 23rd. Now, in the description box below, I'm going to include Saffron Olive's recent video talking about the kind of quickest bans that have happened in Magic's history, and this would be up there in that top 10, top 5 list actually, if it was to get banned. So this card, being the face card of Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth, is kind of just showing the success of this set and how powerful it can be. And I think it would be bad PR to bring in such a large IP, probably one of the most seminal pieces of modern literature that has really kind of changed the direction of all fantasy, Magic, D&D, everything. So having a key card like that banned out of this set, I don't think is going to happen from that. And as I just mentioned, Post Malone just bought this card for $2.6 million from the person that opened it. So it's $2.6 million Canadian, by the way, which translates to $2 million US roughly. So that's why you might see both of those numbers running around. So Post Malone bought it for 2 million USD. The owner is getting 2.6 Canadian. And so officially being the most expensive Magic card out there outside of Black Lotus, or above Black Lotus, I should say. I think because of these two PR ideas, I don't think the card itself, skipping ahead there, will be banned at all, which is unfortunate. But I think regardless, I'm 50-50 on it. I don't think it will get banned because of this, but I still do want it to get banned because it's just too accessible to every deck. And it's just doing too much to the format. But I should also say, before we go on to the Modern Horizon 2 section, I don't think this card being banned changes anything in the modern format. We get back into a really crappy place where it's just scam, it's just Murktide region, it's just these decks getting absolutely ridiculous. So I think we need to find another solution, and that's why I want to talk about Modern Horizons, specifically Modern Horizons 2. But if we look at the modern metagame right now, Rakdos midrange has the Evoke Elementals. 4-color Omnath is literally Ren and 6+ Elementals. We have Living End that has now the creature-based Cascade spell, being able to get around cards like Negate and Spell Pierce, and Force Negation is really powerful. We then have kind of Yawgmoth, Creativity, Crashing Footfalls. Murktide region is literally namesake by Modern Horizons card. Modern Horizons all over the modern format, and I think we need to talk about specifically the elementals. I think Fury is a really big contender to get banned, and I want this to get banned to increase the kind of viability of creature-based strategies. I think decks like Elves and Humans have seen a real downturn because of a card like Fury. Heck, even something like Fish, Merfolk itself, having a really high, surprisingly high win rate in the modern Pro Tour, statistically speaking, which is kind of funny, is being held back by Fury. I think Fury being banned brings some of those cards back, and giving people options is really important. Fury is a really expensive card too. Just making certain decks cheaper is going to be important as well. Next up, I think Grief is a really high contender. I think this is probably one of the cards to get banned as well, because the scam aspect about this deck is really frustrating with Rakdos scam. It comes down, you Thoughtseize your opponent, you then reanimate, you Thoughtseize your opponent again, you take their two best cards, and then you have a 4/3 with Menace. That's not great. Obviously you can Fatal Push this, but then you have to have a fetch line for that. They've probably taken your Fatal Push unless they've done this on the draw, and then maybe you can interact, but then you lose your Fatal Push plus another card. You lose your removal card just getting rid of this, which is great for their Bowmasters and their feature card, and then you lose probably your next best card because of the Thoughtseize. It still had its effect, which is what's frustrating. So I think this is a really powerful card, and just having Menace as a 4/3 is really hard to deal with in general. It's boltable, of course, but you have to be playing Lightning Bolts, which is not as common as you would think in the modern metagame. So Grief, I think, is a really high contender to get banned, and I think it probably will. Now, this next session, I do want to preface by saying I do have a big bias for it. I'm a mill player, I'm a mill channel, so I understand how this next section might feel, but I think one card that should get banned, I don't think will, but should get banned, is Endurance. Now, first of all, outside of the fact that this is one of the most poorly designed Magic cards in known history, and I understand again how that sounds with my bias, I don't think this card should have been able to target yourself. I think it would have been perfectly fine just doing its graveyard hate thing, but that's fine. It does what it does, and I have to play around it. I think this card is too damn powerful. I think it is the most powerful elemental out of all 5. No holds barred, because of how it single-handedly shuts out whole archetypes, and just acts as such a powerful threat. You have to lose a permanent to Fatal Push it. It enters the battlefield, so even removing it doesn't stop the ETB effect. It's already going to go off. It's going to remove the graveyard, so just, solituding it, griefing it, fearing it doesn't really matter as well. It's a 3/4, so it doesn't get bolted, which is frustrating. It has reach, so it blocks flyers. It has flash. Absolutely insane. This being sorcery speed would have actually been much better as well. I think the card would have been much more fair at sorcery speed, because then I wouldn't have to, as a mill player, worry about getting Endurance at instant speed. But there's so many ways they could have templated this card better. I think it needs to get banned, but I also understand that with this, the reason I think it needs to get banned is because it gives decks too much ease of access to an easy answer for graveyard hate. I think it's become too easy for modern players. They do not have to think about graveyard hate, and I would really love to hear the discourse about that bottom. I do not think the modern format has to think about graveyard hate anymore because of Endurance, and it sucks. There's no deck building restriction to it. It's really easy to play green cards in some of the top decks in the format right now. And I think that's what needs to be stopped. I think if you're going to stop graveyard decks, allow them to come back and actually make conscious decisions with cards like Rest in Peace that stop your evoked elementals from being returned or whatever it might be. Maybe not Rest in Peace, maybe something else. Make actual conscious decisions about your graveyard hate so that these graveyard hate decks can come back and actually fight against some of the modern format. But I do recognize the top dog in the format would then probably be one of the Cascade decks, and probably be Living End, Modern, Reanimator. And I think if Endurance gets banned, I would also like Violent Outburst to get banned. So shout out to Doomwake for putting this into my head as well. He wasn't talking about Endurance, but he was talking about Violent Outburst. And I think Violent Outburst is key because it's instant speed. It allows the decks, the Cascade decks and the Rhinos decks and the Living End decks to play at instant speed, which allows them to play Force Negation to protect their combo. And I think just doing that shuts off so many avenues of interaction. It shuts off your own Force Negations to stop the combo. It allows them to go off on your upkeep, making you tap out on your turn so that chances are you can't do anything, and then they untap and then use their own spell to go off. Like Violent Outburst, I think, should get banned if Endurance gets banned, so that the Living End deck can be more interacted with and really just take those two decks down a big notch. So again, out of this section, I think Grief is going to get banned. Fury is a contender, but I think Endurance 100% should get banned. That is my biased opinion. And if it does, I think Violent Outburst should get banned as well. Now, the bonus section, I want to talk about a spicy one where I kind of mentioned in the beginning. I want to talk about unbans. That's right. I want to talk about some of the things that I should be unbanned to provide options to the modern player base. I think keeping an extensive ban list is absolutely incorrect to play design. And again, this is all my subjective opinion. So you've seen, many of you viewers have seen my short form and TikTok videos talking about what cards are banned and why I think certain cards are banned and why they should be unbanned. So many of you might be familiar with my reasonings of, hey, honestly, they're very interactable with. There's so many options in the modern format right now, and there's so many more powerful cards that beat these out. And I want to talk about 3 specifically that I think could be unbanned. Now, firstly, I think we can take this from a lens of one of the more bigger unbans that have happened historically. In February 12, 2018, we unbanned Jace the Mind Sculptor and Bloodbraid Elf. Bloodbraid Elf is almost like unplayable now. You do not see it anywhere, even as a Cascade spell. It's just like weirdly off colors. You don't want Bloodbraid Elf like even in the Cascade decks because it's not blue. It doesn't pitch to Force Negation. It doesn't pitch to Subtlety. It's just like you want those colors over too much red for the Violent Outburst. So it doesn't see play anywhere there. It sees some play in some aggro decks. Jace the Mind Sculptor, just look at the price history of this card. If you look at this right now, it had a huge spike. It was like $100 when it was unbanned, and now all the way down here, it's like $20 or less now. Jace the Mind Sculptor is one of the poorest planeswalkers out there in Modern right now. Sure, you see it as a one-of in control decks. In Legacy, it can be playable, I guess, because it pitches to Force, but it just doesn't do enough. And I think this is what we're going to see with all the unbans that I'm going to mention, because it's just being straight outclassed by all the Modern Horizons, all the power creep, all the planeswalker kind of fatigue that we've been experiencing. It's absolutely outclassed, and I think that's going to stay true for these unbans. First and foremost, past these unbans, there's all the things that should stay here, like Eye of Ugin and Ancient Den. First card I think should be unbanned is Punishing Fire. His card was banned because it was stopping down, like it was really hindering creature-based strategies because it was recurable, and it gave control decks a long-term win condition. So for those of you that don't understand, Punishing Fire deals 2 damage for 2 mana at instant speed. You can recur it for 1 red if your opponent gains life. You combo that with Grove of Burn Willows, where when you add red, each opponent gains life. So you see how you add red, you gain life, you use that 1 red plus an extra mana to return it, cast it, to then like kind of return it and cast it, whatever. So it's 3 mana in total. Your opponent gains 1 life, you deal 2, you're kind of netting 1 damage. So it's a very slow clock, but you're also dealing with your creatures on board. I think this is perfectly fine as a combo. There's almost no creature decks in the format. If you do not ban Fury or Solitude, there's almost no reason why they should stay banned. Give players a clock, speed up the Modern format. We do not need super slow grindy matchups all the damn time. Force people to play interaction, force people to play around this. Give people the headache, because then you'll start understanding why it's not Punishing Fire that's the problem. It's the fact that all these other cards in the Modern format are just outclassing this and supporting this card, making it a problem. Next card I think that should be unbanned. I mean, I forgot to mention Fury, but with Fury in the modern format, as I mentioned, it shouldn't, that card should be unbanned. But I think Blazing Shoal should be unbanned in the modern format as a one-shot card. This card was actually banned after the first Modern Pro Tour. For those of you that don't know, Blazing Shoal Infect was one of the top decks in the format. So you cast Blazing Shoal for its alternate cost, and you pitch something like Progenitus, so your then Infect creature gets +10/+10. And I think, just jumping ahead there, but give your Infect creature +10/+10. You one shot. This was an era with no Fatal Push, no Force Negation, no Solitude. So I think with all these options in the modern format right now, you're ideally Blazing Shoaling on your turn for the Infect creature, so it's very easily Force Negation. I think a card like this can be unbanned because of all the interaction of the format. You can easily remove it with so many options. You can easily counter it with Spell Pierce and Force Negation available in the format. Blazing Shoal is going to do absolutely nothing. And I think just giving people the option to play their one-shot decks in the friendly leagues or at FNM, I think that's perfectly fine. Give people the option to play their budget decks, their cool fun decks, and play with their niche kind of binder piles. I think giving people options is why we want to unban. The next card that I want to unban finally is Splinter Twin. It's the meme. Splinter Twin itself, I think it's finally time for it to get unbanned again, to provide options to players and give another combo deck some room in the format. We've seen enough Cascade, we've seen the Charbelcher decks as well. Storm hasn't been around in a while, and I think the only way Storm comes back is if we unban a Storm specific card, which might be dangerous. I'm kind of hesitant to unban Storm cards. I think it's one of the more powerful cards, combo cards in the format. And so Splinter Twin, I think just being a 4-mana sorcery speed enchantment, like you attach it to something like Pestromite and you tap on tap, like you create infinite Pestromite and you hit your opponent with some determinate amount. I think it's perfectly fine to get unbanned because look, it gets Spell Pierce. It's a sorcery speed enchantment. Spell Pierce is main deck in almost any deck right now. It gets Force Negation because you're paying it at sorcery speed. And I understand these two interaction spells that deck can play as well. But if you're forcing their Splinter Twin, they can't force your force, right? And then you can have Spell Pierce. There's so many ways you can interact with this. Just stop making up excuses. It doesn't matter if they can play it. You can play it as well. Okay, stop making up excuses. Splinter Twin can finally get unbanned in the modern format. It's getting ridiculous. Stop the meme. Let everyone who purchased copies, not me by the way, I have no copies of Splinter Twin, let it enter the format. I just want to cast my Surgical Extraction and beat these pesky combo players. Surgical Extraction, Extirpate. I will destroy all you combo players. Bring it back. But that's my list. I think largely, I think the Ring should be banned. I don't think it will. I think Grief and Fury are good options. I think Endurance should be banned. But if it does, I think something like Violent Outburst will be. And I think Violent Outburst and Grief are probably two big options. You beat down Cascade and force them to play at kind of more on their turn at sorcery speed. Or closer to, and then you stop the scam deck by by making them lose one of their bigger scam options. I think those are the two cards that are going to be banned, but I ultimately think that unbanning is the correct way to go alongside banning, giving people more options in the modern format. If you're going to take away cards, give us some more cards to play with, so that we can provide some variation in the modern format. Instead of just shifting around decks, we can add some new faces to the modern metagame. But I hope you enjoy, and let me know what you think in the comment section down below of what you think about my opinions here of what's going to get banned. What do you think is going to get banned, if any changes at all, in the modern format?